Hey, this is Pastor Mark, and on today's episode of the Fultondale First podcast, we're going to talk about something that drives the way we do what we do here at Fultondale First, and that is simplicity.
Welcome to the Fultondale First podcast. Our mission at Fultondale First is to love God, love people, and make disciples. And this podcast is aimed to help you join that mission. Thanks for joining us for this episode.
Welcome back into the Fultondale First podcast. I'm glad that you are joining us for today's episode. If this is your first time listening or watching, this podcast really is a way to share our heartbeat as a church, to talk about our values, and really to encourage you in your walk with Jesus. So today we're diving into one of our core values as a church, simplicity. Around here we like to say less is more. And I really believe that in the church and in life, simplicity leads to strength and effectiveness. So we're going to dive into what this core value really is and what it means to our church. So let's talk about why simplicity matters. Why is it even a value for us at Fultondale First? So let's talk about culture for just a minute. The culture that we live in, a world that celebrates more, don't we? More activities, more commitments, more programs, more opportunities. And on the surface, that sounds great because it sounds like you're going to be able to accomplish more and more. But what happens is that when you're constantly running from one thing to the next, you get exhausted. You get tired. You get scattered. And in those times, when you're scattered and exhausted, you rarely go deep. And that's not what God calls us to do. And that's not who God calls us to be. And the same thing can happen not only in your life, the same thing can happen in churches. Churches sometimes think if they just add one more program or just one more ministry or one more event, then they'll be more effective. They'll reach more people. They'll accomplish their mission. But often the exact opposite happens. People in the church get stretched thin. Volunteers burn out. And then the mission gets fuzzy. And so Jesus himself actually modeled this value of simplicity. We see it all throughout his life, all throughout his ministry. His call was simply this: follow me. Right? When he called his disciples, he didn't say, okay, I need you to do A, B, C, D, E, and F. I need you to be involved in this and that and this. No, what did he say to his disciples? He said, follow me. Eventually he said, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Very simple. That's it. And his teaching really boiled life down to two commands, two simple commands: love God and love people. That is a really simple framework, but it's also a powerful framework, and it's a life-changing framework when we really follow Jesus in what he called us to be and do. And so it's kind of like this. I don't know if you have ever been to this restaurant. It's one of my favorite restaurants in Birmingham. It's Nicky's West. In fact, anytime that I have a meeting with somebody who's not from this area, I'll always ask them to go to Nicky's West. And a lot of times, even if I'm having a lunch meeting with somebody who is from around here, I'll ask them to go to Nicky's West. I love this place, but I remember the first time I ever went to Nicky's West. It was years ago. Tasha and I had been married just a couple years, and our kids were young, so we did have two kids at the time. Our oldest two were really young. And we had to feed them, and we had to get their food and all that kind of stuff. And if you've ever been to Nicky's West in Birmingham, you'll know that it's cafeteria style restaurant. And so they have this kind of snake winding line that you get in, and they do have a menu, but it's hard to see. And so in reality, what you have to do is when you get up to the place where you order, you see all the choices. And man, there are a million choices. So many different meats and so many different vegetables, so many different sides. You've even got choices on bread that you can have and desserts. And so it's a lot of choices, a lot of options, right? But what adds to this is that when you get up to the line, immediately you'll hear somebody say, may I help you? Can I help you? Can I help you? May I help you? May I help you? And if you don't answer, they keep repeating it over, and they get louder and louder. So they're basically saying, I need you to tell me what you want. And it can be a high stress situation for people who aren't used to making decisions or don't like making decisions. And so Tash and I went through the line with our two kids, and we got to the table, we sat down to eat, and she looked around, she goes, I didn't even get myself any food because I was so overwhelmed by all the choices and by getting our kids' food, she didn't even get her own food. And so that's what I think it can feel like when we offer so many options, right? And when we offer this program and this program all to do the same thing, right? It's like sometimes you go to a restaurant and the menu is like a book, right? 10 pages long, and you can order all kinds of food. That's tough. And after that, the next time we went to Nikki's West was a long time. She was not excited about it. Now, we didn't have small kids and she knew what to expect and it was a little better, but that's what happens when we're overwhelmed with options. Sometimes we just end up frustrated and stressed out trying to make a decision. Now, compare that experience, that menu experience with, like, it's a totally different thing, but compare that experience with when you open something like Google Maps or Waze when you're trying to find directions. You type in your destination and it shows you what? It shows you one clear route. Now, if you want to avoid a road, you can click on something, it'll take you to a different route, but it shows you one route, right? It doesn't overwhelm you with every possible route that you could go, every possible street in town. It just shows you how to get to where you need to go. That's the difference between a map and a menu. Okay, now the reason I'm sharing this in this idea of simplicity is this. You've been probably to a church, I know I have, that gives you a menu of options, right? Page after page of activities, page after page of ministries, page after page of programs. I've been to a church where I'll open up the worship guide or the bulletin and I look at all the list of activities, and it's easy to look at that and think, you know what, I'm not in good enough physical shape to even be a member of this church because I'm going to be running all the time, because the expectation apparently is that I'm going to be involved in everything. And newcomers, when they come to a church, that's what they think if they're overwhelmed with all the options on the menu. But compare that to when, instead of a menu, a church gives you a map, right? They're saying, this is the destination. In our case, it's the mission that Jesus gave us, to love God, love people, and make disciples. This is the destination, but here's the path to get you to that destination, right? And so that's what we try to do. That's our approach at Fultondale First. We don't want to give you a menu of options. Back in the day, in the 90s and early 2000s, churches thought, let's just give as many options as we can, and that'll attract people, and that'll get people excited. Well, we don't believe that works. That's not very effective. So what we've done is, we talked about it in a previous podcast, we designed you a map. We call it Disciple Making Roadmap. And so clearly, we all want to do what God has called us to do. We want to be who God called us to be. We want to be people who love God, who make disciples, who love other people. And so we've created this map to help you get there, this route, this pathway. So we want to give you a map, not a menu. Now, I've had people tell me before that we visited a church and there were so many options, we just didn't know where to start. We felt like outsiders. We didn't know where to begin. And honestly, I felt that myself. You walk in and 10 Bible studies and 6 different men's groups and 7 different women's ministry opportunities, 3 mission trips, 4 conferences. You think, I don't belong there. I can't do all of that. So I think that's another reason why simplicity is so important. Simplicity says, look, you don't have to do everything. All you need to do is take the next step in front of you. And so that's why we have really approached what we do as a church the way we've approached it. We believe less is more. We believe as you're involved in less, as the expectations on your time commitment are less, you can be more effective in what you do. You can be more effective in learning and growing and making an impact. So let's talk a little bit about the biblical foundation for all this, okay? Acts 2:42. I love the book of Acts because it talks about the very first church and what the early church looked like. But Acts 2:42 tells us that the church was devoted to a few things. They devoted themselves to 4 different things: to the teaching, to the apostles' teaching, to the breaking of bread, to the fellowship, and to prayer. And so that's simple, right? 4 things. God used the simplicity of the 4 things they were devoted to spread the gospel across the entire world. And in our context, same way. We want people to know God, to connect to community, to grow spiritually, and to change the world. It's the same aspect. It's really the same 4 things, just in a different context. Also in Matthew chapter 22, again, I mentioned this already, but when they asked Jesus to summarize the entire law, what's the greatest commandment? He didn't give a long checklist. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And secondly, love your neighbor as yourself. Simple, clear, focused. Less is more. 1 Corinthians 14:33 says, for God is not a God of confusion, but a God of peace. And I believe simplicity leads to peace, And complexity leads to confusion. And so we want simplicity. We want a simple approach. And I believe God blesses simplicity because it removes all the clutter and it puts the spotlight where it belongs, on Him. So, simplicity, less is more. That is the focus of our church. And so at Fultondale First, we really believe that. And instead of doing 50 things halfway, we'd rather do a few things really well. And so I've told you our disciple making roadmap: know, connect, grow, and change. But really, what we're asking you to do is to take a step in three main roads, right? Take a step in three main roads. The first one is in worship, right? We gather every week to lift up the name of Jesus. That's the heartbeat of worship, to praise God, to know Him more. And so we ask everybody to be committed to and devoted to that worship gathering. The second thing is a group, right? Now, some of you are involved in a life group, right? That's where discipleship begins, where discipleship happens. And it's a group of like 5 to 15 people typically, where you're doing life together. That's a life group. Some meet on campus, some meet off campus. But another kind of group as well, some of you are involved in both, but a lot of times you're involved in one or the other. But the other group is D group, discipleship group. And that is where relationships and accountability and community really happen in a deep way. That's accelerated spiritual growth as long as you're in that discipleship group or D group. And so we ask everybody to be involved in worship, everybody to be involved in a group, and then everybody should be taking a step in the road of serving, right? Using our gifts, using our passions to bless other people and advance the gospel. When you think about it, that's the map, right? Yes, know, connect, grow, and change, but the map includes three main roads: worship, groups, and serving. That's it. Right? We don't want you to be involved in a million things. We know that less is more, and you're going to be more effective, and you're going to grow deeper when you do less and do less things well. That's the map. That's what happens. And that's what helps people move from being a newcomer to a disciple-making follower of Jesus. Everything else really flows from those three things: worship, groups, and serving. It doesn't have to be complicated, right? It can be simple. If it doesn't connect to worship, if it doesn't connect to groups, if it doesn't connect to serving, then we have to ask, is this really helping us accomplish our mission? Is it really helping us to love God, love people, and make disciples? Because if it's not, it probably doesn't belong on the map. And if it doesn't belong on the map, I'm going to tell you, it probably doesn't need to be in your life, quite honestly. So let's bring this to a close, okay? I want to ask you personally, what about your life? Are you living more of a menu type of life, or are you living more with a map approach to your life of following Jesus? Do you have so many commitments in your life that you feel stretched thin? Or are you living with a sense of calling and a sense of mission? So maybe for you, the call for you today is to simplify, to say no to some good things so that you can say yes to the very best things. Maybe it means reducing screen time, right? So you have more time in the Word of God. Maybe it's cutting down on extra activities so you can actually invest in your family, or you can serve someone in need. Simplicity does something really amazing. Simplicity provides room for you to breathe. It provides a way for you to laser focus on what God's called you to be and do. It frees you to live on the mission that God has given you. Less is more. So our value at Fultondale First is simplicity. And I'm so glad you joined me for today's episode. And I hope this was encouraging to you. I hope it was maybe even challenging to you to evaluate your life and the way you approach church and ministry. And hopefully it's encouraging for you to be involved in those three areas on our map: in worship, in groups, and in serving. So thank you so much for joining again this episode of the podcast. And remember, our church keeps things simple because that's how we can be most effective. Less really is more. So this week, take some time to ask yourself, what do I need to cut out? Where do I need clarity? How can I live better with a map instead of a menu? And if you're part of our church family, my encouragement to you is let's keep living this out together. And if you're not, and you're watching this as somebody sent this to you and shared it with you, if you're looking for a church home, we'd love to have you at Fultondale First this Sunday. We gather for worship at 10:30, and you'd be on that map if you joined us. And so I would encourage you also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Don't forget to share it with a friend. That's our way to spread the encouragement to others. And until next time, remember, keep it simple, stay focused, and follow Jesus with everything you've got. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Help us spread the word about the podcast by sharing on socials too. Thanks again, and we'll see you next episode.